Alright, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about stretching. Essentially, when you work out, like lifting weights or applying yourself physically with weights or cardio or whatever it is, essentially your muscles at a microscopic level are doing something like this. Every time your muscle contracts, it's like this. Every time your muscle expands, it comes out like that. So, contraction, expansion. Okay? So, for example, when you're doing weights, every time you pull that weight up, that contraction comes in like this. Every time it does this, it's basically creating lactic acid, which gets caught into those muscles. So every time you do this, you're basically creating lactic acid that gets stuck into those muscle cells. Okay, so the whole point of stretching, especially if you've been doing a lot of contraction, a lot of like heavy work, you need to stretch to basically pull that lactic acid out of something called sarcomeres, basically like the microscopic entity of muscle cells. So sarcomeres, they just do this, okay? So contraction, expansion, every time they do this, they create lactic acid. So the whole point of stretching is after enough contraction, it generally gets stuck like this. So the whole point is to release it, allowing for the lactic acid to be released from your muscles to go into your blood system. If you don't stretch, that's why you get that extreme pain, because basically lactic acid is eating away at your muscles. So if you don't stretch it out, so if you don't release that lactic acid gets stuck in there, and that's what causes the pain. So stretching is really, really important. Okay, and now when it comes to proper technique for stretching, generally you want to hold any kind of stretch between 15 seconds and however long, okay? You do not want to bob, okay? You do not want to do this, okay? Reason for that is if you've been contracting your muscles, doing workouts or whatnot, and if you start doing this too quickly, you have a very much increased risk of actually tearing that muscle. So, bobbing is essentially momentum, right? Every time you come forward, well, however you bob into stretching, like whatever stretch you're doing, if that momentum is too much and you bob too much momentum into that bob, you can actually cause that to tear. So it's really important when it comes to stretching to do little bits at a time. This is why slow flow yoga is actually really awesome, because it teaches you to stretch progressively. So you're not just like bob, bob, bob. You should not be bobbing. You should not be bobbing, because that momentum could actually cause too much of a stretch, which can ultimately lead to injury, which is essentially the tearing of muscle, like over tearing of muscle. So when it comes to proper stretching, I'm just going to do this basic stretch. So basically you're going to come forward and then hold. No bobbing. Just hold. Okay? The nice thing about yoga, especially slow flow, is to get a bigger stretch, you breathe in. Every time you breathe in, you sort of straighten up your body, and as you exhale, you try and stretch a little bit more and hold it. Now, the whole point about this, essentially every time you breathe in, if you visualize the air, or visualize the air, the nutrients going to the areas that are stretching, it actually allows for a better stretch as well, because you're sending, psychologically you actually are sending oxygen and nutrients to those areas when you're like thinking of like sending it there through your breathing. Also, if you visualize your sarcomeres, like your muscle cells, stretching as well, so when you're inhaling and as you exhale, visualizing the muscles that are stretching, visualizing it to stretch more. So as you come up, inhale and stretch more, visualizing that stretch in your muscles. Come up every time you breathe in, visualizing the air and nutrients going to the areas that are stretched, and exhale, visualizing that stretch. And once again, stretches should be at least 15 seconds long, and it can be as long as you want. So, and just, yeah, do not bob. Do not bob, because that can create so many problems. Because that momentum of the bob, if you're not careful, can actually cause that muscle to just tear. So, that's a little heads up on stretching. Thanks guys, God bless you all.